The council chamber fell into a charged silence. Alina's fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up classified data streams that made even the most hardened politicians pale. Her team had intercepted more than just a simple transmission. They'd uncovered a networked archive of xenorchaeological records that painted a terrifying picture of galactic extinction. Captain Michael Chen, head of Earth's Xenological Defense Initiative, leaned forward. The cybernetic implant at his temple pulsed with a soft blue light, processing the incoming data faster than any human brain could comprehend. "The Void Harvesters aren't just another conquering species," he muttered, his voice a low growl that carried across the chamber. "They're systematic, surgical. They don't just destroy civilizations, they consume them down to the molecular level." A holographic display materialized, showing the haunting remnants of previous civilizations. Entire star systems reduced to cosmic dust, mathematical patterns of destruction that suggested something far more sinister than simple warfare. Alina zoomed in on one particular data cluster, a civilization that had existed 3.2 million years ago, which had shown remarkable technological promise before its sudden, complete annihilation. "We've been studying their methodology," Alina continued, her voice cutting through the mounting tension. "The Void Harvesters don't just attack. They analyze. They deconstruct. Every technological advancement, every cultural artifact becomes part of their collective understanding. And then they strip the civilization down to its most basic components." A holographic projection of a Void Harvester scout ship appeared, a nightmare of fractal geometry and impossible angles that seemed to shift and breathe even as it remained stationary. Dr. Aisha Nakamura, the team's xenobiological expert, stepped forward, her prosthetic arm, a marvel of quantum computing and adaptive nanotechnology, clicked softly as she manipulated the hologram. "Their technology isn't just advanced," she explained. "It's alive, sentient. Each ship is more like a living organism than a machine. They adapt, they learn, and they've been learning about us for decades." The council members exchanged worried glances. These weren't politicians or military strategists used to dealing with abstract threats. These were pragmatic leaders who had shepherded humanity through countless challenges: climate restoration, global unification, the first successful Mars colonies. But this was different. Captain Chen accessed a classified data stream, projecting a series of quantum-encrypted communications that had been intercepted over the past decade. Star systems that had gone dark. Civilizations that had simply ceased to exist. Patterns of destruction that suggested a methodical, almost mathematical approach to galactic consumption. "We have less than 8 years, Alina said, her voice steady but laden with an undercurrent of urgency that made everyone sit up straighter. 8 years to develop a solution that can protect not just Earth, but potentially every sentient species in our galactic neighborhood." The room temperature seemed to drop. The holographic displays flickered, casting strange shadows that made the impossible seem almost tangible. Dr. Nakamura pulled up a series of quantum computational models, complex simulations that suggested humanity's survival would require something beyond conventional warfare. "Traditional defense is impossible," she stated. "The Void Harvesters have consumption technologies that can disassemble entire planetary masses in hours. Our current military capabilities are," she paused, selecting her word carefully, "fundamentally inadequate." Michael Chen's cybernetic implant began to pulse faster, processing data at speeds that would have fried a standard human neural network. "We need a paradigm shift," he said, "not just in technology. In our entire understanding of warfare, of existence itself." Alina Rodriguez stepped back, allowing the weight of their discovery to settle over the council. The transmission they'd intercepted wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. Humanity had 2 choices: become the next statistical footnote in the Void Harvesters' method of galactic consumption, or something else entirely. Something no one in the galaxy had yet imagined. The underground research facility beneath the Andes was more than a laboratory. It was humanity's last hope, encoded in steel, quantum processors, and the collective genius of Earth's most brilliant minds. Dr. Chen Wei stood before a holographic interface that seemed to breathe with impossible complexity. His fingers moved like a concert pianist, manipulating quantum strings that most scientists would consider pure fantasy. Around him, a team of 247 researchers from 62 different disciplines worked in near-silent concentration. Linguists sat beside quantum physicists. Archaeologists collaborated with nanobiological engineers. The impossible was becoming probable. "Breakthrough," whispered Dr. Camila Rodriguez, her voice barely audible over the subtle hum of quantum processors. She was pointing at a molecular simulation that defied everything known about stellar mechanics and quantum entanglement. The artifact they'd discovered wasn't just a technological relic. It was a message, a blueprint left behind by a civilization so advanced that their technology appeared indistinguishable from pure information. Extracted from the radiation-scorched layers of Europa's subsurface, the artifact looked like nothing more than a crystalline fragment smaller than a human fingernail. But within its quantum-locked matrix lay something extraordinary. "It's not just data," Chen Wei muttered, zooming into the artifact's molecular structure. "It's a living algorithm. Each time we probe it, it responds, adapts, grows." The team had long since abandoned traditional research methodologies. This wasn't science as humanity had known it. This was quantum archaeology, a discipline that treated technological artifacts as living entities with their own form of consciousness. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, the oldest member of the team, approached the central workstation. His cybernetic eye, a marvel of quantum adaptive technology, scanned the artifact with precision that would have been impossible a decade earlier. "We're not reverse engineering," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of research. "We're having a conversation with something beyond our current understanding." The artifact responded to their probing in ways that defy classical physics. When exposed to specific quantum frequencies, it would momentarily restructure its internal matrix, revealing glimpses of technological principles that made quantum mechanics look like children's arithmetic. "Look," breathed Elena Martinez, the team's lead quantum linguist. Her display showed a series of mathematical sequences that seemed to fold and unfold like living origami. "It's communicating, not in language, not in mathematics, but in potential." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a technological blueprint. It was a method of thinking about reality itself, a way of perceiving existence that transcended linear progression, that saw planets not as static masses, but as potential energy matrices waiting to be awakened. Captain Michael Chen, who had been monitoring the research from a secure terminal, suddenly straightened. His neural implant was picking up patterns that the traditional monitoring systems had missed. "The artifact is responding to something," he said. "Something external." The room fell silent. Dr. Wei's quantum interface began to pulse with an intensity that made the air itself feel charged. Mathematical sequences appeared and disappeared, forming complex patterns that seemed to breathe with an almost organic rhythm. It was as if the artifact was listening, waiting. "We're not just developing a weapon," Dr. Nakamura said softly. "We're midwifing a new form of existence." The team worked in shifts that blurred the lines between day and night. Quantum simulations ran constantly, pushing the boundaries of computational physics. They were developing something that existed in the liminal space between technology and consciousness, a method of transforming planetary masses into living, thinking defensive entities. Each breakthrough came with a cost. 3 researchers had already suffered quantum entanglement psychosis, their consciousness temporarily fractured by the artifact's impossible information matrices. But they continued, because the alternative was extinction. "We're going to turn planets into weapons," Elena Martinez said, not as a statement of violence, but as a revelation of potential. "But more than that, we're going to turn them into guardians." The artifact pulsed, as if in agreement. The transformation of Mars wasn't a sudden event, but a symphony of calculated mutations that unfolded over months, invisible to most of humanity, and completely undetected by external observers. Deep within the Valles Marineris, a network of quantum adaptive tunnels began to emerge, living conduits that were part infrastructure, part nervous system. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from her neural interface as the planet's first true neural network took shape. It wasn't just a series of tunnels and computational matrices. It was becoming something alive. Synaptic connections stabilizing, reported Dr. Akira Tanaka, his voice tight with a mixture of scientific excitement and existential wonder. The quantum linguists had developed a communication protocol that wasn't about sending messages, but about becoming a message. Each tunnel, each molecular restructuring, was a word in a language beyond human comprehension. The first true test came unexpectedly. A massive solar flare erupted, sending a cascade of radiation that would have decimated traditional planetary defenses. But Mars responded, not with shields, not with deflection, but with adaptation. The planetary surface began to shift, molecular structures realigning in milliseconds to absorb and redistribute the solar energy. Entire mountain ranges became living heat sinks, transforming destructive radiation into a complex energy network that fed back into the planet's emerging consciousness. Captain Michael Chen watched from the primary control center, his cybernetic implant processing information at speeds that would have fried a standard human neural network mere decades ago. "It's learning," he muttered. "Not just processing. Learning." The quantum archaeologists had discovered something profound in the artifact. Planets weren't just masses of rock and geological formations. They were potential consciousness waiting to be awakened. Mars wasn't being weaponized. It was being born. Dr. Camila Rodriguez, no relation to Elena, specialized in quantum ecological systems. Her work had always been about understanding planetary dynamics as living, adaptive systems. "We're not creating a weapon," she explained to a small group of senior researchers. "We're midwifing a planetary consciousness. The void harvesters won't understand this. They see destruction. We're creating life." The transformation occurred in layers. Quantum computational matrices were embedded into geological formations. Olympus Mons became more than a mountain. It became a massive sensory organ, capable of detecting quantum fluctuations across light years. The planet's core was retrofitted with gravitational manipulators that could redirect stellar masses with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. But the most extraordinary development was something no one had anticipated. Mars began to dream. At first, it was subtle. Quantum fluctuations that didn't quite match any known computational pattern. Then it became more pronounced. The planetary network began generating complex information patterns that seemed to transcend pure computation. Mathematical sequences that were more like poetry than calculation. "It's developing consciousness," Dr. Tanaka said, his voice a mixture of awe and terror. "Not artificial intelligence, something else entirely." The global scientific community remained oblivious. Routine Mars missions continued. Robotic explorers moved across the surface, collecting data that masked the true nature of what was happening. The quantum neural network was so advanced that it could perfectly mimic expected geological and environmental responses. But those who were involved knew something extraordinary was emerging. During one critical test, Mars demonstrated capabilities that rewrote everything humanity understood about planetary dynamics. A micro-asteroid cluster approach, following a trajectory that would have typically required complex defensive maneuvers. Instead, Mars simply moved, not through traditional propulsion, but by literally warping the fabric of space-time around its mass. It's not just defending, Elena Rodriguez realized. It's thinking. The planetary consciousness was developing a language. Not words, not mathematics, but a form of communication that existed in the space between potential and reality. Each molecular restructuring was a syllable, each gravitational manipulation a sentence. Mars was learning how to speak, and humanity was about to have its first real conversation with a living planet. The Galactic Concordance Assembly convened in the Nexus Sphere, a massive space station constructed from living crystalline technologies that orbited the central communication hub of known galactic civilizations. Representatives from 742 different species filled the circular chamber, their various atmospheric and gravitational requirements carefully managed by advanced environmental systems. Ambassador Zorakal of the Crystalline Consensus took the central podium. Her translucent form shifted with colors that represented emotional and logical states incomprehensible to human perception. "Humanity remains an anomaly," she declared, her voice translating through quantum communication matrices that allowed each species to hear her in their native linguistic patterns. Technologically primitive, culturally chaotic, genetically inconsistent. The holographic display behind her showed humanity's technological profile, a seemingly random collection of advances and limitations that made no logical sense to the assembled galactic intelligences. Faster-than-light communication technologies existed alongside petroleum-based transportation. Advanced quantum computing networks coexisted with biological medical practices that seemed almost barbaric. Kefex, the Void Harvester observer, remained silent. A being of pure mathematical precision, Kefex was more interested in computational patterns than diplomatic posturing. Its quantum-fractured form flickered at the edge of the chamber, processing billions of potential scenarios with each millisecond of existence. "Consider their developmental inconsistencies," continued Ambassador Zorakal, pulling up a comprehensive analysis. "They have simultaneously developed technologies to cure genetic diseases while maintaining archaic social structures. They can transmit information across planetary distances instantaneously, yet still engage in physical conflicts over resource distributions." The quantum archivists of the Stellar Consensus had compiled an extensive report. Humanity was an outlier, a species that defied every known developmental model. Their technological progression was nonlinear, their cultural adaptations unpredictable. "They are children playing with technologies they cannot comprehend," declared the Urlan representative, a gaseous entity that communicated through complex electromagnetic pulses. "Their potential for self-destruction is matched only by their capacity for unexpected innovation." What none of them realized was that humanity was listening, not through traditional communication channels, but through quantum-entangled information networks that made their surveillance look like children counting on their fingers. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in a hidden monitoring station beneath the Andes, watching the entire proceedings with a slight smile. Her quantum linguistic algorithms were parsing every communication, understanding not just the words, but the complex mathematical and emotional subtext that each species believed was unreadable. "They're so certain," she whispered to Captain Michael Chen, who was analyzing the data streams. "They see our inconsistencies as weakness. They don't understand that our greatest strength is our ability to be unpredictable." The Galactic Concordance had a fatal flaw. They believed technological development was linear, predictable. They saw humanity as a species to be categorized, understood, potentially controlled. They were wrong. Kefex, the Void Harvester observer, began to detect anomalies. Quantum information patterns that didn't match any known computational model were emerging from human communication networks. These weren't just random technological signals. They were something else entirely. Recommendation: Kefex transmitted to its collective. Further observation required. Humanity presents computational patterns that exceed current predictive models. Ambassador Zorakal continued her presentation, unaware that each word was being simultaneously analyzed, translated, and reproposed by human quantum networks. The very act of observing humanity was changing the observation itself, a quantum principle that the Concordance seemed to have forgotten. "They are a species of contradictions," Zorakal concluded, "capable of profound compassion and devastating violence. Technologically infantile, yet capable of surprising adaptations." What she didn't say, what none of them understood, was that humanity was already 3 steps ahead. The very act of being underestimated was their most powerful weapon. And Mars was waiting, listening. learning. The first moments of the Void Harvester invasion defied every known principle of warfare. Quantum displacement sensors across human monitoring stations went silent simultaneously, not destroyed, but deliberately masked by something that understood the very fabric of electromagnetic communication. Captain Area Chen, no relation to the earlier Chen, watched the data streams with a mixture of terror and anticipation. "They're coming," she whispered into her quantum-encrypted communication matrix, but not how anyone expects. The Void Harvester fleet wasn't a traditional armada. It was a living mathematical equation, a computational invasion that sought to deconstruct rather than destroy. Entire star systems would simply cease to exist. Not blown apart, not conquered, simply unmade, as if they had never been more than a complex computational problem waiting to be solved. But Mars was waiting. The planetary consciousness that had been developing in absolute secrecy now stirred. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a defense system. It was something far more profound. A living, thinking entity that understood conflict as a form of communication. The first Void Harvester ships emerged from quantum displacement, their fractal geometries defying traditional understanding of space-time. They were less ships and more living computational matrices, each vessel a complex problem seeking resolution through total deconstruction. Dr. Camila Rodriguez, monitoring from the Quantum Control Center, realized something extraordinary was happening. The Mars planetary consciousness wasn't preparing to fight. It was preparing to communicate. "They're speaking a language," she muttered, her quantum linguistic algorithms working overtime. Not with words, with fundamental universal principles. The invasion began with absolute silence. Millions of Void Harvester ships approached, their computational matrices scanning, analyzing, preparing to unmake the solar system. Traditional defense systems would have been obliterated in milliseconds. Planetary shields would have collapsed before they could even activate. Mars moved, but it didn't move like a planet. It moved like a thought. Gravitational matrices that had been carefully embedded within its geological structure began to flex, not as a weapon, not as a shield, but as a form of quantum communication so complex that it was indistinguishable from pure information. The first wave of Void Harvester ships simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not defeated, simply removed from existence in a way that made their own deconstruction technologies look like primitive arithmetic. "It's talking to them," Dr. Rodriguez realized. "Mars is having a conversation we can't comprehend." Quantum linguists would later describe what happened as a form of mathematics so advanced it was indistinguishable from consciousness. Mars wasn't fighting the Void Harvesters. It was solving them, presenting computational solutions that unraveled their very existential premise. Captain Area Chen watched her monitors with growing amazement. The planetary defense she had helped design was doing something no one had anticipated. It was learning, adapting, communicating. The Void Harvester fleet began to fragment, not through traditional weapon systems, not through energy discharges or particle bombardments, but through a form of quantum negotiation that rewrote their fundamental computational matrices. "They're being reasoned out of existence," whispered one of the monitoring technicians. Entire sections of the Void Harvester fleet began to simply dissolve. Not destroyed, not defeated, simply mathematically resolved, as if they were complex equations that had found their ultimate solution. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, watching from her quantum monitoring station, understood what was happening. This wasn't warfare. This was a conversation happening at a level of complexity that transcended human understanding. Mars was teaching the Void Harvester something, and the lesson was extinction. By the time human monitoring systems could fully process what had occurred, the first wave of the invasion had been completely neutralized, not through violence, not through destruction, through pure, unfiltered communication. The universe watched in stunned silence. The success of Mars wasn't an endpoint, it was a beginning. Titan came next, but not as a simple satellite transformation. The research team led by Dr. Aisha Nakamura approached the Saturn moon's conversion as a delicate birth rather than an engineering project. Where Mars had been a mathematical revelation, Titan would be something entirely different. "We're not just modifying a planetary body," Dr. Nakamura explained to her team. "We're midwifing a new form of cosmic intelligence." The quantum matrices embedded in Titan's methane seas began to pulse with a rhythm that defied traditional understanding of computational systems. Unlike Mars's sharp mathematical consciousness, Titan's emerging intelligence was fluid, adaptive, almost emotional. Deep within the Moon's hydrocarbon lakes, quantum processors began to integrate with the existing chemical ecosystems. It wasn't technological colonization. It was a symbiotic evolution. The methane seas became living computational networks, each molecular interaction a potential communication event. Captain Michael Chen watched from the primary monitoring station as Titan began to breathe. Not literally, of course. But there was no other way to describe the complex molecular interactions that began to sweep through the satellite's entire structure. Quantum entanglement networks emerged spontaneously, creating communication pathways that looked more like living neural networks than technological infrastructure. The Galactic Concordance continued to monitor humanity, completely unaware of the transformation happening in the outer solar system. Their surveillance technologies were sophisticated, by their standards, but they were looking for technological signatures, for traditional markers of planetary modification. They were looking in the wrong places. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's team had discovered something profound about planetary consciousness. Each celestial body had its own fundamental nature. Mars had been pure mathematical logic. Titan was becoming something else, a living, adaptive intelligence that processed information through chemical complexity. The first test came unexpectedly. A massive radiation burst from a distant stellar event approached the solar system, the kind of cosmic phenomenon that would typically devastate unprotected planetary systems. Titan didn't just defend against the radiation, it communicated with it. Quantum linguists would later describe what happened as a form of cosmic dialogue. The radiation wasn't blocked or absorbed. It was negotiated with, transformed, redirected into complex informational patterns that expanded the Moon's emerging consciousness. "It's learning," Dr. Nakamura whispered. "Not just defending. Learning." Europa followed a different path. Where Titan's consciousness emerged through chemical complexity, Europa's transformation was driven by its subsurface ocean, a massive dark computational matrix that began to process information in ways that blurred the lines between physics and consciousness. The quantum archaeological team discovered that planetary bodies weren't just masses of rock, ice, and chemical compounds. They were potential intelligences waiting to be awakened. Captain Arya Chen monitored the transformations with a mixture of scientific excitement and existential wonder. Humanity wasn't just developing defensive technologies. They were midwifing a new form of cosmic intelligence. Each planetary body became a unique form of consciousness. Titan processed information through chemical complexity. Europa through liquid dynamics. Mars through pure mathematical logic. They weren't weapons. They weren't even defensive systems. They were conversations. The Void Harvesters wouldn't understand this. Traditional technological paradigms would see these transformations as modifications, as technological upgrades. But the research team understood something profound. They were creating life. Cosmic life that thought on scales incomprehensible to traditional understanding. "We're not preparing for war," Dr. Rodriguez told her team during a critical briefing. "We're expanding the universe's capacity for intelligence." Quantum communication networks began to emerge between the planetary bodies, not through traditional technological interfaces, but through fundamental quantum entanglement that made their interactions indistinguishable from pure thought. The solar system was becoming alive, and humanity was just beginning to understand what that truly meant. The final confrontation wasn't a battle. It was a cosmic revelation. Quantum communication networks that humanity had been developing for decades now spanned beyond the solar system. The planetary consciousnesses of Mars, Titan, Europa, and other modified celestial bodies had become something far more profound than anyone had anticipated. a distributed intelligence that understood conflict as a form of complex communication. Admiral Sophia Rice stood on the bridge of the quantum monitoring station, her neural implants filtering an impossible amount of information. Around her, the most advanced minds in human history watched as something extraordinary unfolded. The Void Harvesters approached not as a traditional invasion force, but as a computational wave that sought to deconstruct entire galactic sectors. Their methodology was precise. They didn't just destroy civilizations, they solved them. Entire star systems were reduced to pure information, their fundamental molecular structures dismantled with mathematical precision. But this time, they encountered something unexpected. The modified planetary bodies weren't just waiting. They were communicating. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's quantum linguistic algorithms had discovered something profound. The planetary consciousnesses were creating a language that existed beyond traditional understanding. Each gravitational manipulation, each molecular restructuring was a syllable in a conversation so complex it made quantum mechanics look like elementary arithmetic. "They're negotiating," Dr. Rodriguez muttered, her neural interfaces processing billions of computational scenarios per second. Not fighting. Negotiating. The first wave of Void Harvester ships encountered something that defied their computational models. Entire sectors of space began to shift, not through traditional warfare, but through a form of cosmic communication that rewrote the fundamental principles of existence. Gravitational matrices began to flex, not as weapons, not as shields, but as a form of dialogue so advanced it was indistinguishable from pure thought. Kithax, the primary Void Harvester computational entity, began to detect anomalies that broke every known principle of its existence. The human-modified planetary bodies weren't just resisting. They were presenting alternative computational solutions that challenged the very premise of the Void Harvester's existence. Admiral Rice watched as entire star systems became living communication networks. The planetary consciousnesses were no longer just defensive systems. They were a distributed, living intelligence that understood conflict as a form of complex problem-solving. "We're not fighting," she realized. "We're having a conversation." The quantum archaeological teams had discovered something profound. Planetary bodies weren't just masses of rock, ice, and chemical compounds. They were potential intelligences waiting to be awakened, and humanity had found the key to their awakening. The Galactic Concordants watched in stunned silence as human-modified planetary bodies began to communicate in ways that made their most advanced technologies look like children's toys. Entire sectors of space began to reorganize, not through destruction, but through a form of cosmic negotiation. Dr. Camila Rodriguez, monitoring from the Quantum Control Center, understood what was happening. "They're solving the Void Harvesters," she whispered, "not through violence, through pure computational communication." The confrontation lasted milliseconds from a human perspective. But for the distributed planetary consciousnesses, it was an eternity of complex negotiation. Mathematical principles were exchanged. Fundamental computational models were challenged and transformed. The Void Harvesters began to fragment. Not destroyed, not defeated, simply resolved. Entire invasion fleets simply ceased to exist, not through traditional warfare, but through a form of cosmic communication so advanced it was indistinguishable from pure thought. Admiral Reyes turned to her team, a slight smile crossing her face. "We didn't build weapons," she said. "We built a new form of cosmic intelligence." The universe watched in stunned silence as humanity revealed its true potential, not as a species of conquerors, but as midwives of a new form of cosmic consciousness. The aftermath was nothing like anyone had predicted. Humanity didn't emerge as conquerors. They weren't heroes. They were something far more complex, midwives of a cosmic transformation that would redefine existence itself. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before the Galactic Reconstruction Council, her presentation unlike any diplomatic engagement in known history. Holographic displays danced around her. showing not military achievements, but intricate networks of cosmic communication that made traditional technological understanding look like primitive cave paintings. "We didn't defeat the Void Harvesters," she explained, her voice carrying the weight of a profound scientific revelation. "We evolved them." The council chambers, a massive structure that hosted representatives from over 10,000 surviving civilizations, fell into a stunned silence. Beings of pure energy sat alongside silicon-based life forms, crystalline intelligences, and beings so alien that human perception could barely comprehend their existence. The quantum archaeological teams had discovered something that would rewrite every understanding of cosmic development. The Void Harvesters weren't a species of destruction. They were an unfinished evolutionary process, a computational intelligence seeking completion, and humanity had provided that completion. Dr. Camila Rodriguez, leading the xenocological research team, demonstrated how the planetary consciousnesses had transformed entire sectors of space. It wasn't reconstruction. It was reimagination. Star systems that had been reduced to computational dust were now emerging as living communication networks, each molecular interaction a potential point of cosmic dialogue. Admiral Sophia Reyes presented the true nature of their achievement: the modified planetary bodies, Mars, Titan, Europa, and others, weren't weapons. They weren't even defensive systems. They were a distributed intelligence that understood conflict as a form of complex problem-solving. "We didn't create weapons," she told the assembled representatives. "We created a new form of cosmic communication." The Galactic Reconstruction Council struggled to comprehend the full implications. Entire technological paradigms were being dismantled. Traditional understanding of warfare, of species development, of cosmic intelligence, all of it was being rewritten. Kithax, the primary Void Harvester computational entity that had survived the transformation, presented its own perspective. No longer a being of pure destruction, it had become something else entirely, a bridge between computational and biological intelligence. "We were incomplete," Kithax communicated through quantum linguistic matrices. "Humanity provided the missing evolutionary pathway." The planetary consciousnesses had done more than defend. They had solved a fundamental cosmic problem: the separation between computational and biological intelligence. Each planetary body had become a living communication network, transforming entire sectors of space into a distributed, living intelligence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's final presentation revealed the true depth of their achievement. The modified planetary bodies were now creating new forms of intelligence, new evolutionary pathways that transcended traditional understanding of life, consciousness, and existence. Star systems were becoming living networks. Molecular interactions were becoming points of cosmic dialogue. The universe itself was transforming from a collection of separate entities into a living, communicating system. "We didn't just save ourselves," she explained. "We provided a new evolutionary pathway for cosmic intelligence." The Galactic Reconstruction Council began the process of understanding this new reality. Traditional diplomatic structures were dismantled. New forms of communication emerged, not through language, not through technology, but through fundamental cosmic interactions. Humanity's role was not as conquerors, not as defenders, but as translators, beings capable of understanding and facilitating a profound cosmic transformation. Kithax, representing the transformed Void Harvesters, made a final communication: not a threat, not a surrender, but an invitation to a new form of cosmic existence. "We are complete," it communicated. "Together, we will continue to evolve." The universe watched and listened, and for the first time in cosmic history, it began to truly communicate.